The 2000s were an interesting time for Atlus. To many, this was their golden age, but more importantly, this was one of those rare moments where it felt like they greenlit anything. Nothing was too ambitious and all ideas were welcomed, and like every story, there are two sides here, the fan story and the business's story. If you were a fan of Atlus's games, you were feasting. Persona 2 Eternal Punishment, Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne, the Digital Devil Saga Duology, Strange Journey, Devil Survivor, Devil Summoner, RAIDOU Kusunoha vs. the Soulless Army, King of Baden, Persona 3, Persona 4, and more were released. This direction found Atlus developing some of their most influential and critically acclaimed games. Many longtime fans fondly reminisce over these times because Atlus wasn't scared to take risks. Want to revisit the mainline SMT series? No problem. Want to make a spin-off that's so good it may as well be a mainline game? No problem. Want to play the long game and commit to a duology? That's not a problem either. Smaller budgets and shorter development cycles permitted leadership to match their developers' creative endeavors. And while this may sound like the perfect situation, most of these games are cult classics. In the grand scheme of things, cult classics are a double-edged sword. On one hand, you have thousands of passionate fans who love what you create. This may lead to a niche community being formed, a few video essays on YouTube, maybe occasional rescreenings if it's a movie, or a potential reboot if fans are vocal. The obvious issue with cult classics are they don't make any money. Companies operate on return on investment, and if there's no profitability, the likelihood of that director helming another project or that team working on another game quickly diminishes. Essentially, this was the other reality for Atlus in the 2000s. With the US becoming one of the largest gaming markets at the turn of the century, the developers and publishers shifted their focus towards appealing to the West. Atlus, fortunately or unfortunately depending on who you speak with, understood their identity and began publishing more games overseas. Many of these games became cult classics and found a niche audience, but Atlus needed much more than this. Most of them failed to meet expectations, prompting Atlus to lay off its staff. With their backs to the wall, a leaner development team, and an even smaller budget to work with, rising developer at the time Katsuro Ashino was given full creative control over Persona 3. Persona 3 entered development shortly after SMT 3 Nocturne and Digital Devil Saga 1 released. In an attempt to support his protege, Kazuma Kaneko stepped down and gave Shigenori Soejima full artistic control over the characters. Soejima was responsible for creating all the main cast personas, enemy designs, and arcana bosses, while Kaneko's demon designs return as the personas collected throughout the game. And looking at these characters and persona designs, Soejima was more than ready. If you're here, I don't have to tell you how iconic Soejima's characters are. He's been Atlus's go-to artist for decades at this point, and his name is typically featured alongside Hoshino's in Atlus's marketing. His art is beautiful, his characters are iconic, and they're all recognizable. Accompanying these two was the legendary Shoji Meguro. Similar to Hoshino and Soejima, I've discussed Meguro's work at length on this channel. In short, Atlus is or has been home to some of the most talented artists in the industry. While many studios' musical identities can be attributed to an individual like Nobuo Uematsu, Yoko Shimomura, and a handful of others, this couldn't be further from the truth for Atlus. Since Atlus's inception, they've been blessed with musical talent. Megaten wouldn't be Megaten without Tsukasa Masuko, Kenichi Tsuchiya, Toshiko Tasaki, Toshiki Kanishi, Shoji Meguro, and Ryoto Kazuka, to name a few. Atlus genuinely may have the most talented music team in the industry. Meguro was handpicked by Hoshino after working on Nocturne together. Although Meguro was approaching the legendary status at the time, Persona 3's soundtrack hurled him across the metaphorical legend line. While music is highly subjective and everyone has different tastes, the best compliment you can give Meguro is by asking anybody what their favorite project is from him. Some will say Persona 3, 4, or 5, others will say Strange Journey, Nocturne, Metaphor, either RAIDOU games or some other dark horse. His musical range and commanding mastery of several genres are genuinely otherworldly. In parallel with Meguro's incredible score, Persona 3 features numerous animated cutscenes as well. Instead of creating these in-house, Atlus outsourced them to a studio named Point Pictures. Since Atlus was a relatively small company at the time, had financial issues, Japanese games were Japanese games in the 2000s, and the gaming industry was still growing, development articles, interviews, and diaries are pretty sparse. Other than Hoshino reminiscing over how much internal pushback he received for wanting to change the Persona formula and the impetus for the tactics system, Persona 3's development articles are actually hard to come by. I wish more of this was documented, but like most video games, the development cycle must have been hell. With Hoshino advocating for his vision and Atlus's back to the wall, I'm sure most of it was rough. I wonder if anyone on the development team wishes more of this was captured. Then again, this is more of a hindsight's 2020 comment. As an artist, you really never know how your art's going to be received. Will your message resonate with the viewers? Will your art reach the right audience, and other factors are simply out of your control? Nevertheless, it's best to focus on things you can control, like Persona 3's tone, moody atmosphere, and gorgeous cutscenes. Coming off Nocturne and the Digital Devil Saga duology, Atlus was clearly focused on creating traditional Megaten games. If you haven't played any of the mainline or spin-off titles, many of them feature a distinct atmosphere. Every fight is a battle for survival. Characters are either oddly distant or strangely esoteric. The worlds are dense, rich with environmental storytelling, and the nature of these narratives transforms these environments into psychologically horrifying places. Players typically find themselves confronted with mankind's shortcomings or in solitude, forced to reflect on their decisions. The atmospheric score accompanying these worlds elevate the tone to new heights as well. If you've seen my video on SMT5, you'll know that I believe Megaten's tone and atmosphere are integral pieces of Megaten's composition. When absent, the uncomfortable, sinister tone that's part of the series' identity begins to erode. I largely attribute the shift in tone to Koji Okada and Kazuma Kaneko's departure from Atlus. Persona 3, however, had a director coming off of Nocturne and Digital Devil Saga. Both games feature rich atmospheres and have a ton of influence from Atlus's original leadership. Preserving the tone of these games were important, and fortunately, a lot of this tone bled into Persona 3. If you've only played the Hoshino Persona games, playing Persona 3 FES or Portable may feel strange at first. Characters might feel distant, and some imagery may be uncomfortable, the environments may appear darker, and the cutscenes' exaggerated art direction and aesthetic may shake you to your core. From how personas are summoned to the unsettling subject matter, I've met a few people who refuse to play this game because it's too dark. Tartarus finds you climbing seemingly infinite floors. Within these dark and mysterious floors, you'll frequently encounter shadows, blood on the floor, and a musical score that crescendos as you ascend. And when there's a full moon, you'll find transmogrified humans in caskets, crimson red littered throughout the environment, and the abundant use of dark green, blacks, and grays throughout the world. These elements come together to form Persona 3's heavy atmosphere. Everyone knows the color red, and caskets are often used to symbolize life and death, but something that rarely receives enough credit is how well green complements Persona 3's overall color palette. Neurologically speaking, our brain associates green with concepts like growth, renewal, harmony, and tranquility. Dark green, conversely, is usually associated with poison, radioactivity, and other toxic things. With this context and the Dark Hour almost functioning as an antagonist, the Dark Hour's green feels as if it pollutes the environment by transforming it into something nightmarishly beautiful. What makes this juxtaposition so effective is how much it mirrors the uncertainties of life and reinforces Persona's themes. Additionally, Hoshino would triple down, establishing this atmosphere with these absolutely gorgeous cutscenes. If you haven't seen these cutscenes before, you can tell they're older based on the art direction. They definitely have a more retro look to them. Characters and the overall art direction are more akin to anime from the mid to late 2000s. Even though the exaggerated art won't be for everyone, there's so much love put into the cinematography, composition of these scenes, constant use of foreshadowing, and the sense of motion behind everything. Instead of solely relying on exposition to deliver the narrative, Persona 3 employs masterful visual storytelling to create a compelling climax in the opening scene. The opening of this game serves as an excellent case study of show don't tell. For those unaware, show don't tell is a literary technique where authors communicate a story without relying on exposition, dialogue, or much text at all. Presenting a few actions with music, silence, or something else is meant to elicit feelings so viewers can draw their own conclusions. And when viewing the opening cinematic through this lens, it's nothing short of a masterpiece. The opening cutscene finds the main character walking through Tatsumi Port Island as he listens to Burn My Dread. Tatsumi Port Island is a vibrant area, sprawling with life. In the midst of people talking in restaurants, eating, and kids playing in the arcade, the camera abruptly cuts to the sound of running water as the camera slowly pans on a woman's eye. The camera cuts back to the main character checking his MP3 player as the music gradually fades before cutting to the running water with the girl sitting on the floor. Her body language tells us she's distraught, and the firearm in her left hand confirms this as the sun sets in the window. As the camera jumps between the main character and this strange woman, the music gradually crescendos. This increase in volume quickly builds suspense and tension as the woman takes a few deep breaths, slowly pointing the firearm at herself, preparing to take her own life. With the gun pointed at her head, she continues hyperventilating as the music gets louder. Throughout this scene, the camera will cut between running water as her pupil dilates, reflecting the rising tension of this scene. With trembling hands, she slowly presses the trigger before dropping the gun to the floor as she breaks down in tears. With the presumably loaded firearm on the floor away from this girl, the camera slowly pans away from her apartment and fades to black. While there's more to this cutscene, let's focus on what we just saw, more specifically the spectacle of it. Instead of having a camera focus on the main character walking towards it, or a static shot with him walking through town, we're provided with a variety of shots instead. The compilation of shots found throughout this scene captures the excitement of life on the island and the horror this woman faces. As the scene bounces between shots, first-time viewers are immediately confused. Is that a gun? Who is this person? Are they okay? Why is she doing this? And other questions race your mind as the piercing sound of running water grows with Burn My Dread, becoming louder in the background. Between the pace of the cuts, the dilated eye, the sound of hyperventilating, and the music steadily reaching its crescendo, there's a gradual and terrifying sense of motion to these scenes. Whatever's happening isn't right and you can't stop it. You don't want to see someone kill themselves, but it seems like everything's headed that way. Another scene exemplifying the genius of these cutscenes was Takeharu Kirijo's death. While it's easy to gush about this entire cutscene, let's focus on the brief standout between Akutsuki and Takeharu. Something that really stands out with this scene is how motion and visual storytelling are used here. After Akutsuki aims the gun at Takeharu, the camera blurs and cuts away as he breaks free from Aegis. As the camera moves, Takeharu takes center screen and aims his gun at Akutsuki with a black background. We then get this line animation jumping around the screen as we see Takeharu, Akutsuki, Aegis, and Mitsuru's faces. And lastly, we see a lively white bar gradually shrink as the sound of two gunshots go off while the camera pans away from Tartarus. Instead of jumping straight to this shot after Takeharu and Akutsuki fired their weapons, Point Pictures and Atlus decided to blur the screen and introduce some interesting visuals here. Adding a motion blur effect to this scene conveys the messy nature of regaining your freedom and, potentially, hints at Takeharu's rust. Conveying Takeharu's uncertainty of breaking free, drawing his firearm, and defending himself this way adds another layer of fear and tension to this scene. Personally, I like to interpret this as a bit of a character development moment for Takeharu. I haven't been mugged or jumped before, but I wouldn't be shocked if this is what fight or flight felt like. Making one wrong move means you die, and you only have one chance to do this. Furthermore, with the Kirijo group relying on C's and other Persona users to defeat the shadows, I think it's fair to assume it's been a while since Takeharu's been in combat. In parallel with the motion blur symbolizing the situation's uncertainty, this minor interaction provides a new layer of depth to Takeharu and makes speculating about his life before or even during the Dark Hour more interesting. I think it's a fair assumption that Takeharu has been in combat since he carries a concealed weapon. That said, it's clearly been a while for Takeharu, which translates into him being rusty and his potential lack of focus. Like I said, I'm just speculating here, right? But I wonder if he'd survive the encounter if this happened 10 years ago. This minor interaction provides him with a bit of depth and contributes to the story's ongoing mysteries. And lastly, we have this white bar that slowly shrinks. While being a very tiny detail, I really adore the artistic vision behind this. Visually illustrating Takeharu's death instead of simply getting shot and rolling over is why I'm dedicating so much time to these cutscenes. These seemingly minor decisions placed throughout the cutscenes with Persona 3's art direction elevates the overall tone and visuals of this game to new heights. As I said earlier, the art direction, brilliant use of colors, outstanding animation, and the overall tone of the game just feels different. Although this game may appear darker on the surface, there is also an undeniable beauty here as well. Nevertheless, visuals and art direction are only one piece of the atmosphere. The other piece is, of course, music. Music plays a pivotal role in setting the tone, and as you all know, Persona 3 has a great soundtrack as well. If Shoji Meguro gained his confidence with Nocturne and ran with the RAIDOU games, he cemented his legend status with P3's soundtrack. Persona 3 soundtrack consists of influences from several genres: electronic, pop, hip-hop, jazz, post and traditional rock, electronic, and other genres can all be found here. The variety of songs present means you'll almost certainly find something you like. Memories of the City, Battle for Everyone's Souls, Memories of You, Brand New Days, Wiping All Out, and several other tracks stay on repeat, while the rest of them don't really. Now, this might be controversial, but I'd be lying if I said I was in love with Persona 3's soundtrack. Given music's highly subjective nature, it's hard to objectively assess music outside of ear rape and stuff played off a recorder. When it comes to Persona 3's soundtrack, honestly, I've played this game so much that I'm kind of numb to it at this point. You know when your favorite artist drops a new album, you aren't feeling it in your first listen, get used to it after several listens, and gaslight yourself into thinking it was good the entire time? That pretty much describes my relationship with this soundtrack. I don't know, this is probably another SMT4 situation where I wasn't in love with that game's soundtrack either. All in all, I think P3's soundtrack is a mixed bag for me. I much prefer Meguro and Atlus's other works. At this point, I've spoken extensively about Atlus's music across my Megaten videos. I've constantly praised them as one of the industry's best music composers, and I have no idea how they managed to achieve this either. Maybe they're just good at hiring composers, or they take their music seriously. The latter wouldn't surprise me given Square's, Nihon Falcom's, Bandai Namco's, and other long-running JRPG developers focus on music. Atlus's sound team has been on a generational run for decades at this point. What separates them from their competitors is how deep their bench is. Bar for bar, I don't know of any other developers who just have several S-tier composers on call, and if you want a deep dive on their incredible music, I can't recommend friend of the channel Bluemori's The Golden Age of Shin Megami Tensei music enough. Everyone knows Atlus's team is unbelievably talented, and Bluemori does an excellent job documenting the sound team's rich history. If you're a Megaten fan, which you probably are if you made it this far in the video, I highly suggest checking out his channel since Megaten is more of a side quest for me on this channel. The last thing I'll say about P3's soundtrack is that Yumi Kawamoto gave an outstanding performance. The depth in her voice and overall range are incredible. There's a reason why Memories of You and Brand New Days typically evoke emotional responses. I wanted to give her a special shout out because I thought she was the best part of the soundtrack, and then there's Lotus Juice, who probably did the best he could with what he was given. Asking someone to rap over some of these beats is nefarious. All in all, it's a solid soundtrack, but far from my favorite. An area I have almost nothing but praise for, and probably the reason most of us play video games, is obviously the gameplay. As a friendly reminder, Persona 3 was a Hail Mary. If this game didn't succeed, who knows whether Atlus is around today. As such, Hoshino took a ton of risks to iterate upon Megaten's established formula and bifurcate Persona's identity from the rest of the series. These risks would trigger the genesis of modern Persona's identity and, unintentionally, ostracize the first two games from the rest of the series. Persona 3 pioneered several new mechanics and laid the groundwork for 4 and 5 to thrive. The calendar system, social stats, social links, the one more combat system, the dungeon crawling nature of the modern Persona series, and the cyclical gameplay loop can all be traced back to Persona 3. Before diving into the mechanics, let's quickly cover the premise of Persona 3. Persona 3 follows a group of high schoolers trying to eradicate the Dark Hour. The Dark Hour is a hidden hour between midnight and 1 a.m. During this hour, most humans are transmogrified, becoming coffins as shadows freely roam the world. The only people who can defeat these shadows are a group of Persona-wielding high schoolers named the Specialized Extracurricular Execution Squad, or SEES for short. A Persona, at least in the words of Igor, are, and I quote, a manifestation of your psyche. Essentially, they're beings granting you and others the power to defeat shadows. The main character, as you'd expect, is quite special in this regard. He, or she depending on which version you play, is something called the Wild Card. The Wild Card basically means you can summon and use other Personas. After agreeing to join the team and finding other Persona summoning teammates, SEES decides to investigate Tartarus, a massive shadow-infested tower that only appears during the Dark Hour for answers. And that's really all you need to know. The rest of the story follows SEES as they uncover the truth about the Dark Hour. With that said, the Dark Hour is only 1 hour of the day, meaning you'll have plenty of time for extracurricular activities, which brings us to the calendar system. The calendar system is arguably one of the most important mechanics P3 introduced. Instead of dedicating your time exclusively to the Dark Hour, remember you're still a student, and being a student means going to class, answering questions, taking exams, hanging out with friends, studying, clubs, sports, and the rest. In Persona 3, time is your most valuable commodity. I say this because you'll quickly realize there isn't enough time to do everything unless you're following a guide, which I don't like to do. Most days in Persona 3 find you attending school in the morning, doing a plethora of things in the afternoon, and even more in the evening. When answering questions in class, you may have realized a musical note icon appears. As you answer questions, listen to lectures, and do other activities outside of class, you'll gradually level these social stats. These stats take a while to level up, eat up a ton of time, and have many levels to them, but they're more than worth it in the long run. To break up the monotony of leveling these up throughout the game, you can hang out with classmates and others in events called social links. Whether they're members of SEES, a classmate, or a side character, they all have unique stories. An area I often praise Atlus and Megaten for is their incredible world building. For almost 40 years now, Atlus have created countless interesting and fully realized worlds. I'm not sure if it's the cast with their own subplots, NPCs with tons of dialogue, the environments echoing the narrative's themes, the underlying sense of dread, or something else entirely, but they all feel so distinct. While most games find players interacting with NPCs to get immersed in the world, Hashina wasn't satisfied with simply adding more exposition. As such, Persona 3 expertly synergizes world building, character development, and combat into social links. Many of these characters are tackling their own trauma, dealing with issues they haven't discussed, making awful life decisions, or learning more about themselves. It's genuinely fun speaking to these characters. Some of them may even have interesting stories you'll probably want to see through to the end. Although Persona 3 is home to some of my favorite social links, they all aren't written equally. P3 social links can best be described as Atlus's first time writing these. Some characters go through entire arcs with a resolution, while others don't really go anywhere. Akanari's and Maiko's social links best illustrate this dissonance. Akanari is a sick 19-year-old battling through a terminal illness. When you first meet him, he tells you he has a genetic disease and that he's going to die soon. He describes his life as darkness and doesn't believe anyone can understand him. He then asks why someone would want to live a long life if death is inevitable. Throughout the social link, he expresses how happy he is you don't look down on him and how thankful he is for your friendship. After writing his will, Akanari decides to start writing a book with a morbid story about a pink alligator eating his friend. Later, Akanari discovers that his body is too frail for surgery, so the hospital releases him as he awaits his death. And during his final rank, he tells you that he's finished the story. After eating the bird, the alligator drowned in his own tears, creating a lake allowing beautiful flowers to bloom with a tree carrying delicious fruit. Other animals would stop by to eat, being completely unaware of what happened to the alligator. Much like his own life, Akanari comes to realize it's okay not to understand the meaning of it. He believes we create purpose in our lives and rely on others for support. He then thanks you for visiting him and helping him discover the meaning of life. There's also a touching scene in the epilogue where you meet his mother. His mother thanks you for teaching her and her son the value of life as she vows to make the most of what she has left. Listening to Akanari's existential thoughts about his mortality and his resentment for existence is heartbreaking. And in his search for meaning, he discovers his own value of life, which he memorializes in his book. The themes present in this social link reinforce the major overarching themes Persona 3 establishes, but we're getting ahead of ourselves, so just keep this in mind for later. It'd be unrealistic to expect all P3 social links to be this introspective, but most of them are nowhere near this level of writing, as we can see with Maiko. Maiko is the middle school girl who hangs out at the shrine. She tells you her parents don't get along and always fight, leading her to believe they'll get a divorce. Eventually, you find yourself eating takoyaki with her as she reminisces about her life. After confronting her parents on the divorce and being told to stay out of it, she decides to run away from home, which you're rewarded for supporting. Once her things are packed, she says goodbye and runs away. Shortly after, her parents arrive, beg her, say they're looking for her, and you help them find her. When they get home, her parents explain why they were getting a divorce, and Maiko decides to move away with her mom. This social link isn't awful like some of the others, but the execution and resolution are a bit strange here. It's my understanding that Hashina wanted us to experience how traumatizing divorce can be for families. Hearing Maiko struggle to understand what her parents were going through and how their divorce impacts her is tragic. Where things become strange, however, is how players are meant to handle this. Throughout social links, players are presented with dialogue options rewarding you with different points. Given the importance of time and wanting to be efficient, players will most likely consult a guide to maximize the number of points received. I'm bringing this up because the best choice for players is to advocate for a middle schooler to run away from home. Many kids struggle to empathize with complicated emotions, but that doesn't mean they can't sympathize. When Maiko's parents break down why they want a divorce and how it's not her fault, she understands and makes the tough decision to go with her mom. Nevertheless, encouraging a middle schooler to run away from home is kinda wild. There's also another huge issue with this social link, but I think everyone knows where I'm headed with this, and hopefully it's fixed in Reload. All in all, P3 social links are pretty hit or miss. Every Akanari has a Fuka, every Maiko has a Mutatsu, and every Mitsuru has a Nozomi. Peaks and valleys probably best describe these. Another probably divisive feature P3 includes is the ability to reverse social links. If you don't hang out, ignore, or cancel plans with characters, their social links will reverse. Reverse social links can be fixed by speaking with said angry individual. On one hand, this is cool because that's how life goes, right? I'm sure we all know someone in our lives who appears out of nowhere whenever they need something, but on the flip side, these usually cost an afternoon, and you'll probably ignore this mechanic if you're following a guide, so I don't even know why I'm talking about it. Anyways, I really love the sentiment and the overall execution of these social links functionally. As I said earlier, they flesh out the world by making it feel dynamic. Whether this is your first or third Persona game, there's always the sense of discovery whenever a social link introduces you to another one. In parallel with the decent writing and the incredible world building these social links bolster, you may have realized all these social links are tied to tarot cards. To explain the significance of this, we need to talk about the Dark Hour. Every day at midnight, the Dark Hour begins and brings Tartarus with it. Tartarus is this behemoth of a tower seas must climb, and as someone who got into the series with Persona 5, I shouldn't have to tell you about the culture shock I had. Why are the floors randomly generated? Why does the music barely change? This feels like a grind, and other thoughts flooded my mind as I climbed all 200 plus floors. The problem with this approach is that I was comparing it to a game that released a decade later. When playing an almost 20-year-old game as of writing this essay in 2025, perspective is paramount. Long-running series can mechanically or tonally shift as it continues. Persona 5 is praised for further refining Persona 4's foundation with numerous quality of life changes, further streamlining the combat and providing dungeons with a huge facelift. Dungeons are now huge with gimmicks, rewards player exploration, and always feels fresh. Capturing the excitement of not knowing what's next, it's easy to understand people's disappointment with Tartarus. Yet this brings me to another question. Why didn't you enjoy Tartarus? Do you dislike it because it's not a palace, or do you fundamentally not enjoy its execution? I'm not asking this question to change your mind, but I'd like to ensure our discussions are targeted towards Tartarus' shortcomings rather than judging it comparatively. As someone who initially didn't enjoy this place, my opinion changed when viewing it individually. Tartarus, in my opinion at least, has a lot to love about it. I think Hoshino and the team were aware players may get exhausted climbing Tartarus, so they implemented several changes to keep the dungeon crawling dynamic. Although these changes may sound small, I'd argue they play a huge role in carving out Persona 3's identity. In addition to the randomly generated levels, Tartarus employs glowing enemies, golden chests, randomized loot, random floors filled with gold hands or armor, checkpoints sending you back to the first floor, each block features a unique aesthetic, and the music slowly crescendos as you ascend the labyrinth. Glowing enemies are dangerous shadows for you to fight. Beating them for the experience is already reward enough, but you'll have to fight them if you'd like to complete Elizabeth's requests. We'll come back to these later, so just keep them in mind for a sec. In addition to these glowing enemies, you're bound to come across a few golden heads. These rare enemies are a joy to come across because they drop valuable items. These items can make combat easier or just sell for a ton if suitcases full of money aren't enough. I can't stress how useful these items are in the early game because, as we all know, in Persona games you're either rich or in those high school trenches. As you keep exploring, you'll inevitably stumble across these golden chests. While rare, unless you're on a chest floor, these chests can provide some incredible rewards, rare weapons, armor, accessories providing powerful skills, and Elizabeth's request items make these a treat to find. The biggest problem with these chests are just how rare they are. I know complaining about the rarity of a rare thing sounds hyperbolic, but these things can be a nightmare to find when you need to. Elizabeth has several delivery requests that only spawn in these rare chests, and I remember spending a few hours on stream just going up and down these floors waiting for one of these chests to spawn. I have no idea what the likelihood of these chests appearing are, but increasing this likelihood would have been much appreciated. That said, some of the rewards you get in these are very helpful, so it makes sense, but finding request items can be a nightmare. When players arrive in Tartarus, you're greeted with your friends and an ominous blue door. This blue door takes you to the Velvet Room where Igor and Elizabeth reside. We'll talk about Igor later, but let's focus on Elizabeth for now. Elizabeth is Igor's assistant. Curious about you and the outside world, she provides you with a bunch of requests for you to complete throughout the game. Some of these require you to take her out on dates, speak with certain characters on specific days, and others require you to defeat enemies, collect items, and do other things in Tartarus. While many of these requests are defeat X amount of enemies or simple fetch quests, some of these rewards can provide Tartarus with a sense of direction. Sure, you'll be spending most of your time in Tartarus fighting shadows, hitting checkpoints, and leveling up, but these requests provide you another reason to visit Tartarus, breaking up the monotony of simply reaching the next roadblock to I'm looking for X, Y, and Z on this run, but look at all the cool stuff I found provides Persona 3 with a unique identity compared to Hoshino's other Persona games. Discovering randomized gear with elemental buffs, resistances, or other stat increases you can't buy keeps exploration fun in case everything I've described up to this point wasn't enough. You can even, not that I ever did it, ask your party members to search the floor. They'll probably die in a fight, but you can certainly do this if you so desire. Since now is probably the best time to bring this up, it's annoying that you can't run through your friends. I've been jumped countless times because they didn't move, and getting jumped can be rough given how unforgiving P3's combat system can be. The one more system is great. Actually, let's take this one step further. It's not far-fetched to say that without the one more system, my channel probably wouldn't exist. If you've seen my Nocturne video, you'll know that P5's combat system shattered my understanding of turn-based games at the time. Outside of Pokemon and playing Final Fantasy X as a kid, I thought turn-based games were boring. Before you judge me, going from games like Kingdom Hearts to the original Final Fantasy VII was a lot for 13-year-old me. Atlus's one more system, conversely, is actually pretty straightforward. When striking an enemy's weakness, the enemy will be knocked down and you'll gain another turn. If you knock down all the enemies and have at least one teammate, you can do an all-out attack, dealing massive damage to the enemies. And similar to the press turn system, enemies follow the same rules. This is probably a be careful what you wish for moment, but I wish Shadows had all-out attacks as well. And that's pretty much it. Before we keep discussing the one more system, let's quickly revisit Igor. As you defeat enemies, you'll be given the opportunity to collect demons, items, and other boosts throughout shuffle time. When you collect personas, not to be confused with demons, Igor in the Velvet Room can register them to your compendium and allows you to fuse them as desired. It's absurd the remastered version of Portable doesn't have manual skill inheritance, but we'll talk about Portable more in depth later. Between collecting, leveling up, and fusing personas to create stronger ones, longtime Atlus fans will feel right at home with P3's gameplay loop. And similar to the mainline series, you can easily sink countless hours in the Velvet Room creating your favorite abomination. You may have also noticed that each persona has an assigned arcana, which finally brings us full circle. As mentioned earlier, social links and personas are connected through their arcanas. When in possession of a persona with the same arcana as the social link, players will receive additional points towards each decision made. Maiko, for example, is the Hangman arcana. If you have a persona of the Hangman arcana when talking to her, you'll receive more social link points, which saves you a ton of time in the long run. Players are also incentivized to complete these social links since they're rewarded with bonus fusion points. As you level up a social link, personas of the same arcana will receive proportionally larger bonus fusion experience. For example, personas fused with level 1 social links will receive a minor experience bump, whereas personas fused with max social links will probably learn most of their moves. If you're willing to go above and beyond and complete a social link, you're rewarded with that arcana's strongest fusion, which is always my incentive to complete these. Since personas take a ton of time to level up, completing these social links will save you a ton of time and enhances fusion since the fused persona can inherit more moves. If you're still not motivated to do these for some reason, trust me, the fusions you unlock from these makes combat a joke. The fusions are very powerful in the late to end game and will make your life much easier. I know Persona 3's combat system is seen as clunky, but like Tartarus, I think there's a ton to love here if you're willing to give it a chance. While being admittedly small, I love how the main character can use every weapon in Fez. I really don't know why they got rid of this in Portable. Removing options from RPGs seems to be at odds with the genre's design, but I digress. An area that's received universal criticism over the years is Persona 3 Fez's tactics system. Whenever anyone recommends Fez, someone always says you can't control your party members and shares a traumatic story about the Persona 3 tactics system. Unlike Persona 4 and 5 providing players direct control of party members, Persona 3 employs tactics to influence your party members' actions. And despite seemingly everyone hating this system, I love the tactics system, and I'd argue it's one of the most underrated things about Fez. Okay, I'm sure I probably lost some of you with that, but just give me a second to explain, I got you. For those that don't know, players are provided with a myriad of options to control the party. These tactics are all straightforward, so I won't waste anyone's time going through each one of these discussing what they do. Between the intelligent AI and the robust list of tactics, there are more than enough options to get party members to do almost exactly what you want them to do. When I was fighting the Reaper in this example, I realized his debuffs expired, so I set Akihiko to heal/support, prompting him to use Marakunda to lower his defense. I set Junpei to do the same after our defense buffs expired, and set Akihiko to continue attacking since Ken was our healer and I was our main damage dealer. Junpei used Murakukaja to buff our defense, and Akihiko used Matarunda to lower his attack. Honestly, I don't think Atlus gets enough credit for creating this brilliant AI. The team members are smarter than they get credit for. As long as Fuka scans all the enemies and you leverage each tactics as needed, you can easily get them to do what you want. The fact that these AI are smart enough to detect weaknesses, will knock down enemies, heal appropriate party members, and reapply buffs and debuffs as needed, I'm shocked they get as much hate as they do. The tactics system also provides Persona 3 with a pretty unique identity. Although Hoshino said tactics were used to provide each character with their own personality, Persona 3 really makes you feel like you're leading a unit. There's literally nothing more cathartic than scheming a plan, assigning tactics, and watching your team execute this plan flawlessly. It's a small thing, but it's nice not having to pick moves for everybody. I know this is a really small complaint, but we've all played games where you're just selecting the same moves all the time. Simply having an AI accurately do this is so nice. And as much as I love the tactics system and I wish other Persona games had this level of AI, there are definitely some drawbacks to the system. Tactics can only be set by the main character. This is an issue because of the sequence of turns. Tactics players' leverage are derived from the current situation. If you have all your party members, you'll probably assign a few of them to attack and the other one to heal/support just in case. However, if your healer dies in an AoE attack, you can't just change your party members' tactics until it's your turn. The nature of this system rewards players with foresight rather than reacting to what just happened. This scenario also makes getting jumped deadly since it might be a while until it's the main character's turn again. It also doesn't help that if you're playing portable, they removed a lot of tactics like knockdown, and AI is much dumber as well. I understand Portable wants us to use direct commands since the tactics menu has been gutted and the AI is much worse, but tactics are still in the game. No one probably cares about this in the grand scheme of things, but it's a shame that Atlus completely abandoned tactics after Persona 3 FES. Yes, tactics are still in Persona 4 and 5, but the AI leveraging it is really bad. Even with the limitations in mind, I thought the system was actually pretty well executed, all things considered. I'd love to see Atlus take a stab at tactics again and potentially refine it in the future, but I mean, that's never gonna happen. In Portable, there were numerous moments where I set Junpei to heal/support and he'd never use his buffs. When combining these issues with the AI refusing to block and rarely using any items, fights like Natural Dancer become abhorrent. It seems like everyone justifiably prefers direct commands, and it's easy to see why. Adding direct commands fixes all these issues, so I can't blame anyone for preferring them. Let's not forget, direct commands were a byproduct of community feedback as well. Direct commands, to be clear, are far superior to tactics in every way. Creating specific strategies and immediately responding to enemy actions drastically changes the flow of combat, and yet there's a reason I still use tactics even in my playthrough of Portable. I don't know, I'm probably just weird, but I don't think FES is unplayable because of tactics. There's something charming about using them, and the AI is more than capable of getting what you want out of them. Just make sure that you're scanning everything and changing everyone's tactics appropriately and you'll be perfectly fine. Anyways, FES in my opinion has other issues that we'll get to, but let's talk about the fatigue system. As the team explores Tartarus, they'll become tired over time. When tired, you inflict less damage, receive more damage, attacks are less accurate, and it takes multiple turns to get up after being knocked down. Although this may seem extreme, this was added for a reason. Each time you return to the first floor of Tartarus, your health and magic are fully replenished, meaning without the fatigue system, you could just reach a checkpoint, refill your health and magic, and complete Tartarus in a single day. This isn't really an issue in the grand scheme of things since fatigue kind of fades away as the party levels up. The higher level you are, the longer it takes to get fatigued. This system makes sense and I get why it's here, but Atlus clearly wasn't happy with it since they reworked it entirely in Portable. Honestly, I'm apathetic about fatigue. I think it makes sense within the context of FES. As Persona players, we're all trying to min-max our time anyways, but Atlus, at least in the opening hours, didn't want us just coasting through the game. Like I said earlier, this problem disappears as you level up, and it'd be absurd to get free healing with no repercussions. I think it's a good checks and balance system that forces us to use our time wisely, at least in the early game. It's also fun to plan around when you get tired since being sick can be quite beneficial. That said, if someone said they hated this system, I'd probably just agree with them and move on. I mean, there's a reason this system never returned in future entries and was reworked along with other mechanics in Portable. When taking a step back to reflect on Tartarus and P3's core combat system, there's a reason why so many people love Persona 3's gameplay. Tartarus's dynamic floors make exploration exhilarating. Gear with randomized stats is reminiscent of something you'd find in Metroidvanias. Elizabeth's request incentivizes you to explore Tartarus. Defeating enemies for rare and expensive items are actually really helpful. Collecting Persona for fusion are fun, and the combat system is fun and rewarding, especially when everything works. Persona 3 is critically acclaimed for pioneering this exceptional combat loop, but now that I'm thinking about it, this praise should be extended towards the entire gameplay loop. The Persona formula is one of the most engrossing systems I've ever engaged with. Leveling up social stats unlocks social links. Leveling up social links unlocks more personas to fuse, and fused personas receive experience bonuses, which makes combat easier. Everything is ubiquitous. This uniform interconnectivity of Persona's gameplay loop is absolutely sublime. I vividly remember my first playthrough of Persona 5 when I realized I shouldn't be going to sleep all the time. Hanging out with your friends, working a part-time job, studying for exams, exploring Tartarus, fusing demons, and just planning your days is seriously addicting. I'm sure we all had moments when you're thinking, I'll just play for an hour, and then just, 3 hours pass. Atlus clearly knew Hoshino was onto something, since Persona 3's DNA can still be found in their brand new IPs as of writing this in 2025. Calling this formula anything other than legendary would be insulting. With that said, this was Hoshino and the team's first outing with this formula, and while this system was largely praised at the time, Atlus would go on to refine it with Persona 3 Portable. Before starting this project, I thought it'd be a great idea to play Persona 3 Portable. I never played Portable, you can actually buy it, and believe it or not, I like to play and recommend games everyone can buy, mostly. As we all know, the remastered version of this game would leave a lot to be desired. Between the compressed audio, fascinating icon choices, lack of demon skill inheritance, AI upscaled backgrounds, character models still looking like PSP models, and the lack of quality of life changes, this version receives a lot of justified criticism from the community. Despite everything, I actually really enjoyed my time with Portable, and I think it's clear why people prefer this version over Fez. Some of the quality of life changes makes going back to Fez kind of hard, honestly, and unfortunately I finally understand why everyone is divided on the best way to play this game. Fez, in my opinion, features another layer of immersion and a moodier atmosphere that, I believe, better fits the tone of Atlus's narrative. It's not that Portable doesn't have these elements, but seeing characters move, the detailed backgrounds, and the incredible animated cutscenes create a much better experience in my opinion. Persona 3 Portable initially released on the PSP in 2009 in Japan, 2010 in North America, and 2011 in Europe before receiving the remastered treatment in 2023. Rather than simply porting the PS2 game to PSP, Atlus saw Portable as an opportunity to further refine Persona 3. This endeavor resulted in a plethora of changes that split the community. The most notable change that everyone's probably realized is the new visual novel presentation, so let's start with that. Instead of using animated cutscenes and character models to tell the story, Persona 3 Portable leverages a traditional visual novel aesthetic. Since I've already gushed about Persona 3's atmosphere, immersive world, and these animated cutscenes, let's just say some of the immersion is gone. In my opinion, I think it's hard to gauge how well of a job Atlus did translating these scenes since I played Fez first. Fez's visuals, world, and animated cutscenes were playing through my mind as I experienced the story. With that said, however, I do think there's enough context to make sense of what's actually happening, but character deaths, comedic moments, and other scenes lose their melancholic charm. In Elizabeth's dates, for example, you don't see her dump her purse into the fountain, and you don't see her frantically running up the elevator. The comedy in these scenes is derived from the absurdity of these actions, so when you translate this action into text, there's just something missing. Like I said earlier, I'm not the best person to ask since I played Fez. If you made it this far in the video, I'd love to hear your thoughts about the story and presentation if you've only played Portable. Another area that drastically changed in Portable is how you explore the overworld. The fully explorable 3D overworld has been replaced with this cursor to select things, and I actually really like this. Instead of running from point A to point B with no fast travel, you can now select where you'd like to go. And when you combine this with fast travel, you'll be flying through the world. It's wild how much time you'll probably save traversing the world like this, but I don't think it's for everyone either. I'm sure there's lots of people out there who'd prefer to see the worlds fully rendered instead of scrolling across the worlds with a cursor. Seeing characters move and just running around the world is nice. Tartarus, on the flip side, is fully rendered in 3D, which is, kind of needed to happen, right? I know the PSP's hardware is the working theory as to why Atlus handled exploration this way, but I don't know if I subscribe to this belief. Listen, I'm not a developer or a programmer, so I could be way off here, and yes, I know this is an apple to oranges comparison, but seeing games like GTA Liberty City Stories and Assassin's Creed Bloodlines make me question the validity of this claim. So let's address the elephant in the room. Yes, Ubisoft and Rockstar were and still are much bigger than Atlus today, so they probably had more resources to work with. Nevertheless, if Atlus hypothetically could have fit the fully rendered worlds into this game, I think the conversation shifts towards why. Speculating why Atlus deliberately chose this approach is really interesting in my opinion. Did they consider making another Persona game like this? Were they tired of making fully 3D rendered worlds? And other questions quickly come to mind. Who knows, maybe they were thinking about adding the answer and realized it wouldn't fit on onto a UMD at the time. The UMD might have been another bottleneck, but we're starting to get off track and this video doesn't need to be any longer. The biggest time saver Portable introduces though are the new combat updates. When Atlus released Persona 3 and the tactics menu received a ton of criticism, Persona 4 onward introduced direct commands, allowing us to directly control party members. And these direct commands would make their way into Portable alongside other quality of life changes from Persona 4. Follow-up attacks were added, standing up doesn't take a turn anymore, skill cards were added allowing players to teach their Persona skills, you no longer have to speak with party members to change their equipment or request healing, the main character can only use one weapon, and the fatigue system was overhauled so we become tired after exploring Tartarus now. To offset the fatigue system change, we now have to pay for healing at the clock. If you're coming from more recent entries in the series, these quality of life changes brings Persona 3 more in line with them without fundamentally changing its core gameplay identity. Gear with random stats, challenging Tartarus bosses, and randomized floors are all here with much more dynamic gameplay thanks to direct commands. The biggest shakeup Portable brings is the female main character, better known colloquially as FEMC Shiomi Kotone. Think of Shiomi as an alternate route to the main story. Shiomi features a new weapon type, vastly superior social links, incredible new music, and a more upbeat, optimistic tone to her dialogue options. Remember how I said Fez's social links were a hit or miss earlier? I can't stress how much better FEMC's social links are when compared to Makoto's. Most of them are great and even provide a ton of development to male party members who are oddly absent from Makoto Yuki's route. Although Shiomi brings a ton of life to the game and her social links further develop the cast, I don't think her inclusion is that important in the grand scheme of things. Before starting the game, the developers recommend Makoto for new players to get the original experience. I don't know, I guess I'm apathetic of her existence. A lot was added, sure, but I don't think there's enough to say the game isn't finished without her inclusion. I like Shiomi well enough, but I'm indifferent about her inclusion overall. With that said, just because I feel this way doesn't mean you have to. The community loves Shiomi enough that they're modding her into Reload and she appears in Persona Q2. Holistically, Portable can best be described as FEMC and quality of life changes. I alluded to this earlier, but some of Portable's changes make going back to Fez hard, and I'm not just talking about direct commands. If you'd like to change your party members' gear in Fez, you need to go to Tartarus, whereas in Portable you just pull up a menu. Even something as simple as healing requires you to speak to party members in Fez, while you can easily heal everybody in Portable's updated menus. The best quality of life update by far has to be the retry feature. I don't know if this was a native Portable feature or introduced in the remaster, but simply adding a retry button makes exploring Tartarus and full moon events much better. Spending an hour in Tartarus, dying, and losing all your progress if you didn't save sucks. It can be really punishing, and I'm sure we've all been there before. The retry feature is especially helpful with full moon events since you're no longer sent back to the main menu. Whenever you stumble upon a boss in a turn-based game, well, any boss for that matter now that I'm thinking about it, you'll usually die a few times to learn the AI's tendencies. What sort of boss is this? Which party member should I use? Which demon should I fuse? And other scenarios will arise as you formulate a plan. And the simple addition of the retry feature drastically streamlines this entire process. Using the word streamline can sometimes garner mixed emotions. Streamline can be used in a negative or positive situations. Negatively streamlining something may remove or overtly simplify mechanics, while positively streamlining something may make a mechanic more convenient without jeopardizing its foundation. Portable's best example of this is how the menu will show you which day social links are available. Sure, you can remember every day everyone's available, or you can just pull it up in the menu. Adding this doesn't change the nature of social links and saves you a ton of time. Yet, this is Persona 3's biggest conundrum. There's no definitive version. Do you prefer Atlus's original vision with the animated cutscenes, otherworldly aesthetic, and the answer? Go play Fez. Would you like to play Shiomi with a refined system and worse presentation? Play Portable. Before sitting down to write this video, I was planning to use Portable to discuss Persona 3 since I never played this version of the game. Ignorantly, I had always thought it was an inferior experience since it lacked the atmosphere, and after beating Portable, I was baffled as I immediately empathized with everyone's frustration. Now that I've actually beaten Portable, I can confidently say that it's a great way to experience Persona 3 if you're looking for something close to the original experience. Nevertheless, there's something hauntingly inviting with Fez's atmosphere. Persona 3 senses sense of dread and anxiety, especially in January, are just missing in Portable. Everyone can probably tell by now that I'm a huge fan of Fez's moody tone and incredible atmosphere, but I also love great game design as well. Simply put, I think Fez is the better experience, while Portable is the better video game. By experience, I'm primarily talking about Fez's presentation and atmosphere, whereas Portable's numerous gameplay refinements and new mechanics make it mechanically superior in my opinion. And if you're curious of my unconventional definitive Persona 3 experience, I'd recommend playing Portable and watching the animated cutscenes as you play along. Not that you know where these cutscenes are. Here's the part of the video where I'd say it sucks there's no definitive way to play the game, but I can't since I haven't played Persona 3 Reload. As I've said in past videos, Persona 3 Reload from the outside looking in looks like a fundamentally different game. Sure, the story is still there, but the gameplay, tone, art direction, soundtrack, and everything else has been modernized. Like the word streamline, modernized often bears a negative tone in 2025, but I can't confirm or deny this since I obviously haven't played the game. I'm not interested in passing judgment or even having opinions on games I haven't played yet, so I can dedicate a separate video to it in the future if anyone cares. Regardless of which version you choose to play, Persona 3 is a beloved and fondly remembered game for its incredible story, mostly outstanding cast, and the collection of thought-provoking themes. Despite the fact that I've spent almost 50 minutes on atmosphere, mechanics, and Portable, I think it's common knowledge that most people play Persona for the story. Contrary to the mainline series' focus on environment and introspection, Hashino's Persona narratives are much more focused on character-driven stories. We spend a lot of time with and watch characters develop throughout the game. We see their insecurities, watch them face adversity, and help them when they're at their most vulnerable. Instead of speaking about the cast individually, I think the best way to talk about them, and the narrative for that matter, is to discuss the themes Persona 3 tackles. But before we do that, let's quickly talk about Persona 3's biggest issue, which is, of course, the pacing. Persona 3, unlike most of Atlus's games, opens with a bang. After watching this beautiful cutscene, you're quickly introduced to characters, the world, personas, combat, Tartarus, and the exceptional gameplay loop. Persona 3 also establishes the overarching mystery and drama very quickly. After the first hour, you'll be thinking, who are these people? Why is everyone strapped? Where did the shadows come from? And who created the Dark Hour, to name a few? All these questions and the remarkable gameplay loop will keep you playing if the mysteries don't implore you to continue. The biggest issue with Persona 3's story overall is that it's a bit back-heavy. I don't think it's a controversial opinion to think the second half of the game is much better than the first half. Things really pick up when you finally reach Yakushima. Before that, Fuka's bullied, she joins Seas, the mysterious boy keeps visiting you, Yukari and Fuka looks into the Dark Hour, Strega is introduced, and Akihiko fails to recruit Shinjiro back to Seas. And sure, this sounds like a lot of stuff until realizing all of this happens over the span of almost 90 in-game days. In the moments you aren't engrossed in social links, eating ramen, and dungeon crawling, you're usually just waiting for the plot to progress. Yet, we can't call these wasted moments either. A lot of the development that occurs in the early hours are eventually revisited, like Junpei's jealousy. During May's full moon event, Junpei shows signs of wanting to be the team's leader. To him, this is all just a game, and since it's just a game, he wants to be the leader of Seas. So when Mitsuru asks you to be the leader, his animosity towards you begins to take form. The Dark Hour, personas, his power, and everything is just for fun. Since Junpei's life hasn't been shaped by trauma like Yukari's, he can't wrap his mind around the severity of the situation. Nevertheless, this development is quite relevant for Junpei down the line. Now, Persona 3 is a very long game, so it makes sense why the game is written like this. There needs to be twists and turns throughout to keep us engaged, but in my opinion, it felt like Atlus was more focused on reaching the conclusion rather than the day-to-day moments, providing players with subtle hints about Akutsuki's goals, diving more into Junpei and Akihiko's personal life, or providing more context during the opening hours might have made them more impactful. Then again, if the sequel's anything to go off of, a longer intro probably isn't the answer. Just to reiterate, it's not that nothing happens in the first couple of months, but similar to Junpei's naive demeanor, it's hard to wrap our minds around the significance of these moments yet. After hearing this, I wouldn't be surprised if you thought I was nitpicking, and you know, you'd be right. When discussing a narrative of Persona 3's caliber, you kind of have to, since this is really the only criticism that I have. Even with the slow start, it's not a coincidence many consider it one of Atlus's best stories. While I usually struggle to recommend games with slow opening hours, I'd be stupid not to recommend Persona 3. The themes of Persona 3 can best be described as mature. Not mature as in sexual content, strong language, or gore. By mature, I'm primarily referring to the subject matter the game tackles. I'd go as far as calling Persona 3 psychologically horrifying at times due to its uncomfortably relatable subject matter. Everything discussed in this game at some point will be relatable whether you want it to be or not. Personally, a lot has happened in my life to relate with the cast's struggles. Instead of jumping straight into Persona 3's perspective on existentialism, let's ease our way into things, starting with the burden of younger generations. Before heading to Yakushima, Yukari confronts Mitsuru about the Dark Hour. She believes Mitsuru is withholding information from Seas and wants to know what she's hiding and why. After revealing the shadows and the Dark Hour are a byproduct of her grandfather's mistakes, Yukari lashes out after hearing this. In the midst of this reveal, Ikutsuki reminds Yukari that everyone in the accident paid with their lives. Yukari is a character that, historically, everyone seems to hate. Snark remarks, an attitude, and more initially rub players the wrong way. In this scenario, however, I think her complaints are mostly valid. When you're younger, your understanding of the world is far more juvenile. If you had $20 as a kid, you thought you were rich. You thought everyone followed the golden rule, evil didn't exist, and your parents could never sympathize with you. Your understanding of the world and problems you face in the grand scheme of things are immeasurably minuscule by the time you get some life experience. The disconnect with our parents, and older generations for that matter, are rooted in ignorance. When you're young, there's nothing wrong with being oblivious to the world. As a matter of fact, most parents go out of their way to shield their kids from reality when they're younger. Preserving your adolescence in a bubble is something most parents strive to do, but all of this may crumble as you learn about history. History serves as a bridge to the past. History is what connects us to our parents and them to their parents and so on. And when looking at the world through this perspective, we're living through the ramifications of others' decisions. Groups of people who've been uprooted throughout history, the brain-drained third world countries continue to experience, crumbling infrastructure, antiquated bureaucratic structures, regions of the world robbed of their resources, the atrocities of mankind, and passing down issues to the next generation connects us to the past. Bringing this back to Persona 3, I think Yukari's frustration is totally justifiable. I think a lot of people forget that these characters, even though they've been through it, are still high schoolers at the end of the day. Dealing with your emotions, losing your father, seeing your mother deal with your father's loss, the adventure known as puberty, and being burdened with the ability to summon a persona to stop the Dark Hour is a lot to deal with. And more importantly, this theme, prepare to hear this a lot, is something we'll all eventually face. Younger generations must deal with the past mistakes, even if we don't want to. When thinking about this dichotomy, it's hard to complain about as you get older. As much freedom as we believe to have, where you live, where you work, who your parents are, the genes you inherited, the opportunities you receive, and more are out of your control. And coming to terms with reality can be really frustrating. Even though we still have control over our lives, it's difficult to not feel chained down by others' past mistakes at times. While this theme can be found throughout most of the cast, no one embodies this struggle better than Mitsuru. Mitsuru Kirijo is the heir of the Kirijo Group. The Kirijo Group, and I quote, is an international corporation which boasts innovations in many industries. Whatever that means. All that really matters is Mitsuru's grandfather probably started the company and she's poised to take over it one day. As such, her family has prepared a life for her to succeed when that day comes. The problem with this lifestyle is you're clearly ostracized from others your age, and because of her grandfather's mistake drastically altering the course of the world, it's Mitsuru's burden to bear. Something I haven't heard other video essays touch on is the burden of possessing a persona. Other than Junpei, Fuka, or Akihiko, who's either happy or apathetic of having one, the rest of the cast sees this as a burden. Yukari struggles to summon her persona in the opening. Mitsuru has a focused demeanor despite knowing it's her responsibility to clean up this mess, and Shinjiro is troubled by simply having one. I know the Dark Hour, Shadows, and Strega are an extreme example, but the ramifications of the past will continue to terrorize future generations to come. And in this example, instead of talking about college students or even young adults, we're talking about high schoolers. I can't begin to imagine what dealing with this as a 16 or 17-year-old would even be like. This becomes even more tragic when thinking about Ken, who's only 13. Ken's story is another tragedy, introducing another one of Persona 3's many overarching themes: don't grow up too fast. 2 years before the events of the game, Ken's mother died. Her death was reported as an accident, but Ken saw everything. Following these events, he entered a deep depression over the loss of his mother and grew frustrated at everyone's sympathy. Once he accepted reality, he desperately wanted vengeance and not to be patronized. This behavior is on full display when Ken joins the team and even in his gameplay. After defeating what Seize believes to be the final boss, Junpei pitches the idea of throwing a party and Mitsuru obliges. After everyone is done calling dibs on their favorite pieces, Ken, a 13-year-old boy, asks for an order of tamago to gauge the chef's culinary excellence. And from a gameplay perspective, this yearning for maturity can be found with Ken's choice of weapon. As we progress the game, players will gradually gain access to surveillance footage of Seize members. I love these scenes, by the way. Some of them provide a ton of characterization and others are just funny moments. Ken's in particular describes why he uses spears and his burning desire to reach adulthood. This scene finds him training with his spear as he talks to his mom. The reason he uses a spear is to make up for his size. Since he hasn't gone through puberty yet, he's smaller than everyone and believes he needs to make up for it somehow. There's also some milk on the desk telling us he, like a kid, believes drinking milk will make you taller. While Ken's character arc is tragic, there is also something deeply relatable with Ken. At some point or another, we all desperately wanted to be older. We all wanted money, our own places, the ability to drive, and freedom as a kid. Many of us who felt this way believed we understood the world. Yearning for maturity also prevented us from learning more about ourselves. Describing the importance of youth is challenging. In our hyper-competitive society today with acceptance rates, percentiles, tax brackets, and more, we spend most of our lives in this rat race. The only time in our lives we're able to do something without worrying about our time is when we're kids. When you're young, there's something magical about everything. Whether you're captivated by a TV show, a sport, video game, or anything, there's this hopeful and optimistic outlook we bring to it. This obviously erodes as we get older, but seeing the world as a place with limitless opportunities is something I think we all fondly reminisce over as we age. Additionally, our lives are often dictated by decisions we make. Decisions and actions say more about us than any words we say. Lessons learned from these decisions shape our future selves, beliefs, and behaviors. I'm sure we all learned something as a kid we all keep in mind to this day. And this is one of those messages Persona 3 is trying to convey. Ken was undeniably dealt an awful hand in life, and I can't even imagine what losing a parent at the age of 11 must have felt like. But a part of him also died with his mother that night. The ability to dream, try new things, bounce ideas off family, relate to teens his age, and discover his own identity has been replaced with vengeance. All that's left is a broken teen who's angry at the world, drifting through life with one goal in mind. Ken isn't the only character who feels this way either. Junpei experiences the same problem initially as well. When we first meet Junpei, he doesn't care about much. He goes to school, hangs out with friends, and that's really all he has going on. He doesn't care about his grades, clubs, or any other extracurricular activities. Rather than being worried about the future, he enjoys his life one day at a time. And after he awakens to his persona and joins Seize, he finally finds his purpose. Fighting shadows and saving the city curbs his boredom as well. Things change after Akutsuki discovers a way to end the dark hour. After hearing this, Junpei is greeted with mixed emotions. On one hand, he understands that Seize has been fighting to abolish the dark hour to save mankind. On the other hand, eliminating the dark hour means losing his persona, Seize will be disbanded, and his aimless, mundane life will resume. Junpei's ensuing turmoil is actually quite interesting. He clearly enjoys being a Persona user and part of Seize. Seize provides his life with meaning even though the basis of its formation is inherently tragic. Seize exists solely because the dark hour is present and everyone's lives are at risk, which in turn means Junpei's meaning is technically derived from others' suffering. Coming to terms with this dark revelation, Junpei's bittersweet mindset shifts towards anger and aggression. He can't put it into words, but he's genuinely pissed to be in this quagmire. This newfound purpose was the result of the Kirijo group's mistake, but he knows he's just another person searching for meaning without the dark hour. Junpei's initial development serves as one of P3's earliest examples of foreshadowing existentialism. Discovering the purpose of life is one of the many questions Persona 3 challenges players with. The problem with these questions is they're often open-ended. Logic, empirical evidence, rationale, upbringing, and historical trends often inform us of our worldviews. When posing such granular questions, artists usually present them fearful of telling us what to think. The best media, in my opinion, ask these questions as creatives gradually distill their perspective throughout the narrative. Providing themes and other relevant subject matter for the audience to piece together is why I'm writing this video. Persona 3 in particular has a lot to say about life, meaning, and purpose through its characters and story, and if Junpei scratches the surface for these questions, then Aigis represents them when they're fully realized. Aigis is another character struggling with her purpose and pursues humanity for an answer. Initially designed to destroy shadows, her mind starts to waver the moment she joins. Seeing everyone have fun, sleep, go to school, dealing with emotional problems, and watching their lives outside of C's, she begins to wonder why we act as we do. I won't spend too much time talking about Aigis since the machine becoming human is a fairly common character in science fiction. With that said, P3 probably has my favorite example of this, but I digress. What sets Aigis apart from this cliche is how she challenges her purpose. Rather than writing her as someone questioning the genesis of mankind, she realizes her reason for existence is to protect the main character, which in turn means protecting mankind. As we spend more time with her and she learns about people in the world, she begins to understand there's more to life than just following orders. Challenging your purpose and discovering your meaning is a very powerful message many will probably never ask themselves. During the final battle against Nyx, Aigis cries as the main character returns. Many interpret this scene as Aigis finally becoming human. While I agree with this interpretation, I think we can take it a step further. I also interpret this scene as her starting to remove her shackles of purpose, and when the main character dies in her arms, it almost feels like she's finally free to live her life. Now, just to be clear, I don't think her and Makoto have a toxic relationship, but his existence quite literally justifies her purpose. This is kind of a weird parallel, so just hear me out, but this reminds me of a relationship I had back when I was in high school. A girl I was dating at the time told me that she struggled to find happiness when we weren't together. As a hormone-driven teenager, I had no idea what she meant, and I just, told her to chill. Reflecting on this a decade later, I think I finally understand what she meant. It's sincerely difficult to face yourself and start to grow as an individual when you're relying on someone else to bring you joy, or in Aigis' example, purpose. So long as Makoto was alive and well, her purpose was justified. And after I broke up with her and following Makoto's death, both of them grew by confronting their own anxieties. For this reason, I think Aigis embodies the themes of Persona 3 perfectly. Since joining in Yakushima, she experiences a remarkable amount of development while also experiencing similar trauma and grief like the rest of the cast. And as everyone mourns the loss of loved ones and close friends, Makoto's death is what sends everyone over the edge. Something that sort of bothers me about Persona 3 is its image, more specifically, how it's remembered. Many remember Persona 3 as the game about death, and that makes sense. If you don't know how this game ends when you start it, it'll hit you like a ton of bricks. It did for me at least. The reason Persona 3 is largely remembered for its perspective on death is because it's the recurring catalyst that drives the most change. With that said, while death, trauma, and grief are certainly present, there is so much more to this game than just death. The reason it took me 24 pages, or over an hour to get to this point, is because Persona 3 is such a thematically dense game to process. Throughout the story, almost everyone is confronted with a tragedy, which is almost always death, unless you're Fuka. Death is something that fundamentally shapes the cast that we get to experience firsthand. Yukari is haunted by her father's death. I don't know if everyone still hates Yukari, but her father's death and the way her mother copes with it fundamentally changes Yukari's perspective on life. His death also prompted her to join C searching for answers. For Akihiko, after Miki's death, him and Shinjiro endeavor to become strong to prevent this from happening again. And after Shinjiro's death, he's shattered until realizing he has others to protect. Shinjiro's story might be the most tragic since his mistake literally created an orphan. This resulted in him spending the rest of his life haunted by that night and atoning for his sin. This event caused him to leave C's, drop out of school, distance himself from Akihiko, take persona suppressors, and enter a deep depression. We obviously see how much this accident affected him, but I would have loved to see him before the accident. I imagine he would have been focused on finding strength like Akihiko. However, death isn't just about grieving and learning to live with it. Rather, Persona 3 is more focused with presenting the realities of life and death. No one's going to live forever. We've all experienced loss, and at some point, it'll happen to us, which begs the question, are we just here to suffer? Unlike most existential media content with simply asking the question, Persona 3 brilliantly provides a perspective. Rather than being fearful of the inevitable, Persona 3 challenges us to acknowledge this reality and live our lives to the fullest. Living your life paralyzed in fear isn't what Persona 3 is advocating. Instead, it implores us to form bonds, to make friends, to find our own purpose, and above all else, enjoy our time here. In my opinion, no other character embodies these themes better than Aigis. Aigis evolved from a machine with a purpose to understanding the value of life. She rejects the reality that life is this preordained thing and decides to live her life freely. She becomes friends with everyone, understands the complexity of emotion, enjoys her time with everyone, and discovers a reason to live after Makoto's death. And if you're willing to look beyond Aigis, these themes can also be represented throughout the entire gameplay. In parallel with the calendar system being fun to plan around, as morbid as it sounds, this system, in Persona 3 especially, literally sets a timer on your life. You have a few months to make friends, to form as many bonds as you can, and discover your meaning. Sure, you have to do things to move the story forward, but how we spend our time and the decisions we make are what ultimately defines who we are. Introducing these themes with a perspective and distilling it through the cast is already an enormous achievement, yet reinforcing these themes through gameplay mechanics as well etches Persona 3 into what I believe to be one of the greatest pieces of media ever created. Creating a compelling story, discovering an original thought, having a distinct perspective, and pioneering a mechanic that harmonizes all of these is what I consider one of gaming's greatest accomplishments. While coping with death is undeniably a huge part of Persona 3's identity, I don't think this game gets enough credit for being an incredible coming-of-age story either. Whenever I hear people complain about the cast being too distant, it kind of makes me scratch my head. While I do agree C starts off as a bunch of distant people, by the end of the game it feels like anything but. Everyone is a teenager carrying enough baggage to be the main character of a Silent Hill game. Most of the characters are either broken, ostracized from society, or dealing with trauma most adults would suffer through as well. By the time January hits, the entire cast transforms from a bunch of strangers into a strong-willed group ready to support each other in the face of death. Them finding each other, being bound together by the Dark Hour, fighting alongside, and helping each other through their problems sounds more like a family than a bunch of strangers to me. The bond that Seize has is one that's formed through, for better or for worse, death and grief. Experiencing trauma, relying on others to tackle it, and creating a family through learning to live with it makes Persona 3 one of the most powerful coming-of-age stories I've experienced. Nonetheless, Persona 3 isn't a game for everyone. A lot of its subject matter is inherently mature, and the tone of it will probably turn most people off. Personally, I know a lot of people who refuse to discuss existentialism, so recommending a game that forces players to confront these questions probably won't end well. While the story has its problems, certain characters are underdeveloped, and I feel like they forgot to develop Fuka, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, or however that quote goes. When thinking about Persona 3 holistically, it's crazy to think about what Hoshino really accomplished here. Writing about Persona 3 Fez and Portable in 2025 is difficult since 4, 5, and Reload exists. Even though Persona 3 Fez launched to critical acclaim and sold very well, Persona 4 and 5 sold much better, with 5 thrusting the series into the mainstream. For context, as of June 2023, Persona 5 sold over 9 million copies between the PS4, 5, PC, Switch, and Xbox Series consoles, while Final Fantasy VII sold 7 million copies as of September 2023. And Persona 3 Reload was Atlus's fastest selling game. Sega has credited Persona in the past for being one of their strongest performing IPs, which shouldn't surprise anyone at this point. The reason I bring this up is to point out that, like me, Persona 3 probably wasn't your first game in the series. When revisiting older titles from long-running series, we all have this tendency to compare the latest entry with older entries. While this approach is fine in a vacuum, and we're all entitled to our own opinions, newer games don't exist to devalue the classic entries. Going from Persona 5 to 4 to 3 will feel more and more primitive, but that doesn't mean Persona 3 Fez and Persona 4 2008, or even Golden for that matter, are meaningless. Are Persona 3 Fez and Portable rough around the edges and a bit dated by modern gaming standards? Yeah, sure, but does that detract from it being one of Atlus's most important games? Not even kind of. Respect Persona 3 for what it accomplished and acknowledge its shortcomings, but don't ever disrespect it. There's a reason why this game has a passionate fan base 20 years later, countless video essays on this platform, and why people don't consider Reload the definitive version. If you'd like to know why Persona 3 garnered a following in 2006, I implore you to remove all expectations from previous entries and to play this game in a bubble. Instead of calling Persona 3 Fez or Portable obsolete, they should be respected and celebrated for all that they accomplished, because despite their rough edges, they're still classics. Bridging narrative themes into gameplay mechanics, developing a fairly large cast, and tackling timeless subject matter, Persona 3 triumphantly stands as one of the medium's greatest accomplishments and one of my favorite games ever made. This is the game that's the first of its kind. This is the game that established one of the medium's most iconic formulas. This is the game that had to walk for the others to run, and this is the game, most importantly, that saved Atlus. All right. Wow, that was a ton of work. This video has really just grown out of scale, and for some way, somehow I ended up playing freaking this game like 3 times. Streams were fun. Obviously the game's a ton of fun to play, but you know, FEMC route plus main character route plus Fez and all this other stuff was a lot, but hopefully the video came out well, because I wanted to give P3 kind of a special video, because I don't think, I haven't talked about Persona yet on my channel. I've mentioned it obviously in the Nocturne video, but I've never, talked about it. And, I played Persona 3, 4, and 5, and obviously depending on how this video does, I can, talk about 4 and 5, which I've been streaming over on Twitch if anybody's curious on they want to catch the show live, which would be super cool. But huge shout out to the Domain Dwellers for supporting my creative endeavors and being patient with me on this very, very, very long turnaround. This is definitely the longest turnaround that I've had on a project. It's also the biggest scope of work that I've been on, but also it's been like a busy past couple of months. So fortunately I'm back here for a little bit now. So hopefully I get to, get back to streaming, get back to creating a little bit more content. Well, hopefully more content more frequently. But yeah, just Persona 3 clearly, as you could tell, means a lot to me, and it means a lot to others. And hopefully this video shows why it's not just old people talking about this, because I didn't I went back to this from like all the way from 5, right? I went from 5 to 4 to 3, and at first I was like, this is kind of old, this is kind of jank. But as time passed, I just, learned to appreciate it. And then you really start to appreciate Tartarus and how good some of the gameplay is. But I'm also sure that I said some probably hot takes about liking Tartarus more than some other areas. But, it is what it is. Anyways, I don't want to make this video any longer than it needs to be. So huge shout out to the Domain Dwellers. Feel free to come through and catch the show on Twitch if you guys want to say what's up, or just, play Persona with me and just hang out. Please consider becoming a Domain Dweller. Would really appreciate anybody's support if you have any extra dollars a month. I guess some questions before we wrap this up. So here's the hotly debated question that everybody always has. What's your favorite version of Persona 3? Period. Are you a Fez enjoyer? Do you enjoy the original over all the other versions? Do you think Reload fixed all your problems? Are you an advocate of portable? Just where do you kind of fall on the Persona axiom? Because oh my god, there's so many. Also, who's your favorite C's member? That one I'm very curious about. As you can clearly tell, I do like Yukari. I think she's like misunderstood, but the best character, I don't know. The entire cast is great. I really can't pick. Which of the Hoshino Persona games are your favorite? Are you a fan of Persona 3, 4, or 5? Or do you prefer Persona 2, or are you somebody that prefers Persona 1? Can't wait to keep the conversation going on in the comments below. And most importantly, how do you get into Persona? Did you just go into a game store and pick it up? Did you have a friend that told you about it? Did you see a trailer on TV? Did you see a YouTube video? How did you get into this franchise? I'm really curious, but like I said earlier, please consider becoming a Domain Dweller. Consider joining the Discord, where we talk about Atlus, Lies of P, fighting games, stealth games, freaking anything. If you've seen my channel, you've seen that I upload stuff on every video game. But yeah, I will catch you guys in the next one, whatever project that might be.